So we got a group of educators from Mitcham Plains Partnership together, and really they were at a point where they wanted to look further into the indicators of numeracy, which was a partnership goal, wasn't it? They'd done some work with Anne Baker across the partnership, and I think they really wanted to clarify their thinking about how this track and monitoring was going to happen. So we decided to get them together, and as staff teams, that was really important to the directors, and perhaps get a shared understanding of what that looked like. And they decided to focus on I Quantify My World, as that had been a focus really with the Anne Baker work. You set the scene really at the beginning of the day, didn't you, for them?
We talked about learning, and when you're looking at children's learning, to be able to focus on that, not what the child was doing. Then we had a little film clip that was probably only about 20 seconds, but it just helped narrow in that lens to be able to just talk about what was the learning in that, not what happened.
Yeah. So we got them into small groups, about 6 or 7 people, and they brought documentation, and it was whatever they used for their documentation, so whether it was learning stories or observation notes, floor books, didn't matter. And we tried to get them to focus on 4 things, and that provided feedback to the person. So it was really around if they could see in their documentation the child as a learner, so what were they noticing about the learning, which was what you sort of set the scene about, whether they could see the educator in it, so that intent, the educator's intent, whether they could see any possibilities for what might happen next, and then if there was anything that as a site they had any learning from it. So that was really the feedback that they then provided to each other.
So they had to listen, and then they had a chance to be able to make that comment, didn't they?
Yeah.
And across the different sites, that was valuable because they got to hear things that they didn't regularly sort of perhaps use, and shared those understandings. But I do think their comments were that they did feel that raised their deeper understanding of how to use the indicators in that way, and to look for those learning processes in what the children were doing.
Yeah, I think it really did support that deepening understanding of the indicators. And then what we heard in the discussions, although they were highly anxious, I think they would all say that at the beginning, that they weren't used to sharing to that level, but what we found was they very quickly came into a space where they actually enjoyed that sharing, and they got a lot out of it. And we heard them really talking about what the real quality aspects of the documentation, regardless of what it looked like. And what I've heard them since talking about is that real purpose. And so what's the purpose of this documentation? What is it? Is there a different purpose for the scribbly notes? And there was lots of discussion about how much time do you spend on this? We can spend hours on this. So what's the purpose? Who's the audience? Who are we trying to give this information to? I think that's some of the things that they've gone away to think about. Some of them have actually audited all of their processes, their documentation since, so they've really sat down and thought about, well, do we do a lot of this type of documentation for this purpose, but maybe we don't do enough of something else. So that's been interesting for me to see as a result of the day. So I think it's important to say also that this same group of educators chose to repeat this process at another time. They have regular teacher-educator network meetings, and they facilitated it. I couldn't make it on the day, so they facilitated it themselves, and they chose to do it using a different indicator. So for me, that was saying that they really did get a lot out of this sharing process, and that they wanted to do it again. The really noticeable thing for me is that there's been a shift from them talking about the doing to really noticing the learning. And so I think they see that now as a point. They certainly talk much more confidently about using the indicators and using them to really assess where children are at, and then to plan for that next stage for children's learning. So for me, that's been the shift in their thinking. And I think that the opportunity to really be together as a group beyond just their site teams, where they're hearing that from other educators, was really significant.
What did you notice that was different, the big shift that was happening?
I think the big shift has been, I've noticed in their documentation, that where it started documenting the doing, the activities, now I'm seeing a shift to documenting the learning. And that means in their planning that they're not concerned about planning activities, but they're really planning for numeracy learning. They're much more confident, I think, in using the indicators to support that. So I think that's really been the big shift.